So how are you guys doing with 40K right now? And I feel like for all of us that have been playing since the beginning of 8th edition, we're starting to get an idea on the flow of the game and the direction that Games Workshop has intended to take this game. And for me, the two biggest changes that I see emerging are the volume of dice has increased to the point where it is even more insane than previous editions of 40K. If you look at what some of these units can output, not only in terms of strength, because there's this duality of you want a lot of dice, and when you combine a lot of dice with high strength, that just eliminates units like crazy. And I feel like this is a good point to pause, because those of you who are new to my channel or have been following my channel for a while, which I very much appreciate, I don't know where our level of 40K is, and I don't want to miss anything, especially with this kind of understanding vlog. So pausing for one moment, this idea of dice pools, and that to make stuff happen in 40K, you need to throw enough dice at it. So if I have a big unit of Space Marines, I count out the bolters, the special weapons, the heavy weapons, all kind of the different dice I get, and I have a pool. I have a big amount of dice. I shake that up, I roll it out, I take out my misses, and now the pool got smaller. So that result of the remaining dice is what I'm going to use to now influence you to remove models. Now I got to see if I wound you. Now that number, of course, is going to be balanced out by your toughness, by the the strength of the weapon. But the pool, either way, is going to get smaller. Now you're going to take your saves, and that dice pool is even going to get smaller, resulting in models that get removed off the table. And that's before we get into multi-wounds or other ways of negating that final layer of dice. So there's this analogy for me of moving through different dice gates, where you want to start with the biggest pool possible. In this edition of 40K, it's very, very easy to do that. So that's the first change that I see in the scope of the game from previous editions, and that's the flavor that I see right now. Second to that, the games go much quicker. Things tend to move much faster compared to previous editions. Now, if you're new to 40K and you've never played, or this is your first edition to 40K, you wouldn't be new if you've been playing 8th since it arrived, then this is all you know for the tempo and the pace of the game. Previous games took a long time to play. Movement was more defined and a little bit slower. So this has had the intended or unintended consequences of speeding up the game. That makes things more dynamic. That makes things faster. What that means is you go out and paint hundreds of cultists, you put them on the table, and they're based, and the barrels of the guns are all drilled out, and just everything looks great. You painted the eyes on all of them. You've done lens flares on the scopes. It looks amazing. And as soon as you put them down, your opponent goes first, rolls a bunch of dice, and is like, you take 100 wounds. Get those cultists out of there, right? It can be frustrating to put models down and remove models down. It can be frustrating to generate these dice pools. How do we begin to deal with it? How do we begin to address that in 40K? Now, compare this to, this is the other challenge of 40K as a rule system, and I'm going to compare this to DBA, historical wargaming, playing my Roman army, my Romans. I love, my Romans on here, where in 40K, each model is 1-to-1, so one Space Marine equals one Space Marine, and the volume of dice you can generate depends on the weapon, but it is linked to that Space Marine. You lose that, or the model. You lose that Space Marine, you lose those dice. So if I put out a tactical squad of Marines, they're physically tied to the number of Marines I have for the dice. If I take out a stand from my Roman army, it has 4 Romans. It's a square stand. It's got the 4 Romans, shield to shield, ready to go. But it's an abstract number. It could be 4. It could be 12. It represents a block of Roman soldiers. In DBA, when you get hit, when you take wounds from your opponent, well, first they have to make base to base. They roll, and then depending on the type of unit, the quality of what they're attacking, how they're attacking, one of 3 things happen. Nothing. 2, your unit gets knocked back, it gets pushed back. Or 3, it gets destroyed and overrun. It's assuming all 3 of those circumstances, these are blocks of men fighting, you're going to take losses, but it's not significant. In the case of nothing happens, it's not significant enough to push the unit back or destroy it. In 40K, you don't shoot and have nothing happen to your opponent. So we are up against this dice timer, this generating the dice and what's going on. This is further compounded by, it's a you go, I go system. It's not a reactionary system. It's not an initiative-based system like Battletech or a SIMO system, simultaneous system. I fire my mechs, you fire your mechs on there. So this is, I don't want to say abuse because it's in the rules. This is ripe for exploitation. So in 8th edition, if I can generate, this is before we get into even crazy combos, this is just simple dice mechanics. If I can generate massive amounts of dice, and I can get the drop on you or go first, even if you have big units, you're going to take them off, and now you're stuck. All this question was from a comment on my blog, and underneath this video is a link where I'm going to kind of explain this in greater details, and we've got some stuff going on there if we want to kind of take that narrative to a more text versus podcast vloggy format. This arrived from my Necron Tactica, where I play large blocks of Necron warriors. And this was an important question. Fritz in the comments, and we're posting that up. I'm almost done writing that post and that vlog. Fritz, do you still think Necrons as a cornerstone can be utilized? Because it's so easy to wipe out large blocks of warriors. Yes. So the question for that, and we're going to get into Necrons, you need something to negate that. You need something to prevent your opponent from just being able to roll up and rickroll all your Necrons. This way you can keep on shooting back and utilize the cheapness in terms of points, although arguably Immortals are better. The cheapness of points just on quality versus quantity. Quantity has a quality of all of its own, pushing that out. That's the core behind my Necron warrior tactics, but it's a little bit more than just throwing down some warriors. But that led into this, where if it's so easy to wipe out large blocks of troops to the point, for those of us who used to play Warhammer Fantasy, we're having flashbacks of putting down massive blocks of one-to-one troops as opposed to stands like DBA, and you remove them in droves. I feel like I'm playing my Goblins army. It's insane. And I knew things were I knew two things were messed up, not only with my Goblins army in Fantasy, but also the rules in Fantasy, when I literally had hundreds of goblins. I think about 600 goblins. And I had the Squig Riders. I had the dudes with the ball and chain, the Madcap Mushroom guys, the Fanatics. I had Wolf Riders. I had everything. And one of the last games I played, a dude was running Bretonnian Knights, and he had a Lord on a Pegasus, or a hero on a Pegasus. I had Bolt Throwers. I had the Goblin Doom Diver. Still have it all. I guess I should play Age of Sigmar. The Pegasus or the Hippogriff or whatever the heck it was, Lady of the Lake, flying on this thing, flies down my line, causes fear. Half my units run off. And I'm like, dude, you realize we just spent 20 minutes. I spent 20 minutes taking these guys out on movement trays. And then I had a miscast on my shaman. His head blew up. And you would have the shaman be separate than the stands. You wouldn't put them in there, because if a stand of units got overrun or broke, whatever heroes, major or minor, are attached to that, run off with it. So you kind of got away with that. Also, if there was the dumb animosity rules in there. But anyway, my shaman's head blows up. It wasn't favored by Gork or Mork. That causes the two massive blocks to panic and run off the table. I should have put some Orc boys in the army. But digressing from that, 40K being 1-to-1, you lose lots of models. How do we negate this? How do we negate that? How do we stop that? I see 3 or 4 ways to start asking the question. The first is, do you even want to play the game? And not physically 40K. I mean, Games Workshop wants you to buy lots and lots of models. That's why they have escalated this. That's why they've pretty much eliminated any structure. Take whatever the heck you want. That's why they're pushing to where they are. Going to get started with Death Watch. I'm actually really, it sounds like I'm being critical of GW. I'm actually really psyched for Death Watch and just kind of looking through it. Kind of like the Marines I've always wanted to play. And I love Black Templars, but like, anyway, looking at that, your choice is to escalate and bring more to the table. And I do this in a variant of my Khorne Berserker list, where I'm flooding the tables with cultists. And the idea is it's a narrative list where these cultists are trying to attract through glory the gaze of Khorne, just for a moment, to be able to turn the gaze of the god of valor on there and do insane heroic deeds like charge hive tyrants and charge primarchs and stuff like that. And I intend to lose because it's a narrative thing. But for the few times that I have played, I'm not naming any names, but certain smug players that think they are good players, and they're not bad players, but they are just abusing the rules in 40K, which are easy to do. When I drown your super units in wounds and models, and I take you out because I did get a lucky roll, that alone is worth the price of admission. So you could go to that extent, but I got the cultists really cheap. Do you want to do that? Is that the type of army you want to play? Do you want to deal with a 70 or 80% failure rate? Can you accept that? Do you want to paint that many models? Do you want to put them out turn one and then before you do anything, you remove half of them? I don't know. That I can't answer. But a more realistic option that I see is vehicles. Now putting up a layer where vehicles can put out some dice, but they protect, for the most part, the units inside, so you can get a drop on your opponent. Vehicles also right now, in the conversion of the rules over, are a little bit harder to kill. That's not to say you can't torrent them down. That's not to say that there are certain ways to one-shot them. Yes, but generally the stuff inside is safe. That will allow you to get into position and at least get the jump. So if I've got large blocks of troops and you have large blocks of troops and I mobilize my large blocks of troops through mobility, delivery system, vehicles, and I get the jump on you, then I've already removed your dice pool on that. Do you want to play a lot of vehicles? Can you also have elements in your list to prevent your opponent from countering the vehicles? The third way, and it's funny, what is new, what's old is new. I'm having flashbacks to 40K 4th edition right here. And this is just an unintended consequence with how Games Workshop runs things. And it's interesting to see, and I don't mean this as a criticism. I don't. But this is why looking at the history of Games Workshop and 40K and understanding that Games Workshop doesn't always want to reinvent things. They're happy to rehash. You can see where 40K is going and gain a slight advantage. There are a number of players out there that think this is something new. This has been going on. This happened in 4th edition, then Games Workshop changed the rules. So if my troops are garbage, do you remember in 4th edition the Force org chart, that relic where you had to take 2 troops and 1 HQ to unlock everything else? And regardless of the mission, now some missions might have given you more fast attack or more heavy support, or there were little quirks in the rules depending on the codex at the time, like chaos. If you played Iron Warriors, you could take a Vindicator. You could take more Blitz, so you'd kind of spam out a Blitz. You could, or was it a Basilisk? You could take a Basilisk. All Chaos got Vindis back then. But there were little tweaks in there. But regardless of those little tweaks, depending on the mission and your codex structure, you needed 1 HQ and 2 troops. So what everyone did, because troops were pretty awful, why would I take a full Space Marine squad for troops and give the dude a Power Fist, the Sergeant Power Fist, so plus 25 points, and then on top of that, give him a combi, plus 15 points. We're talking 4th edition. Give them all frag grenades, because I need to go at least Simo, so that's plus 1 point a model. Give them crack grenades so they could reliably bust up vehicles. That's plus 2 points a model. Give them a plasma gun, plus 15 points, because Flamer was so-so. And then give them plasma cannon or missile launcher for plus, 45 points? That's like insane. Or I can take 5 Space Marines, naked power armor, no upgrades, nothing, fill out my 2 Force org chart requirements, and then just spend the rest of my bling on Super Killy. That's what I'm seeing now, where people say I can't, with massive hordes, I can't reliably kill by bringing horde, so whatever I need to unlock all the stuff I want to get and to play the free units I get, spend the absolute minimum on the garbage and only take the high quality elite, high strength, high toughness, high amount of volume dice, and beat my opponent's models over the head with that. I don't know if that's a really fun way to play. I don't have answers with that. The real question here is, what kind of game of 40K do you want to play, and where do you want to play it, and then pairing that up with your gaming group to be able to go it that way. But this is the trend where I see in 40K 8th edition right now. A lot more dice, things are a lot faster. What is your answer for that? Play the Horde, fun, but again, the win rate is going to be interesting. Second, got to throw up some sort of layer, got to throw up some way of stopping it. Okay, vehicles are one way. There's other ways, which we'll look at too, and I explore that over on my blog. And 3, do we go back to kind of the 4th edition-esque strategy where spend the minimum to get the unlock of whatever you need on your structure, whatever you're playing, and then spend the rest of the bling on the killie?